Hi everyone, welcome to our second Facebook Live. We're here today with Amy Margolis, who is one of our researchers. Hello. And she's going to be talking to you guys here in just a little bit, and then we'll follow up with a Q&A at the end. But first of all, I'm Samantha. I'm from the NVLD project. You probably met me last week if you tuned in. If not, you may have emailed with me at some point. And thank you for tuning in last week. We had a really great response to the questions and to the Facebook Live itself. And we're glad that you guys came back today. We're actually going to be doing this monthly from here on out. So we'll have different people each week, different topics. If you have suggestions, definitely send us a message and let us know because we would love your input on this. Tomorrow I'm going to be announcing the winner from the drawing from last month's Facebook Live. So if you shared or commented or liked last month's Facebook, then tune in tomorrow to see who the winner of that drawing is going to be. So now I'm going to introduce you to Amy. She is one of our researchers at Columbia. And if you want to see her bio, you can go to our website or check out the email that we sent last night with all of her information about who she is, because if I read it, then we'll get really, it's really long. So anyway, hi Amy, welcome.
Hi Samantha, thanks for having me.
Yes, of course, we're so excited to have you. Today we're going to kind of be talking about once you've received your NVLD diagnosis, whether it's you yourself or a child, you know, your student or your own child, what are the next steps from there? Because we get that question a lot on Facebook and in our emails and phone calls. I've been diagnosed or my child's been diagnosed. Now what do we do? So Amy's going to tell us a little bit about what some of the next steps are and what she might suggest. And you know, it's different for everyone, so keep that in mind as you're listening to this. Some things work and some things don't. I mean, it really just depends on where your skills and strengths and weaknesses are. So
right.
I'm going to turn it over to Amy for a little bit and see what she has to say.
All right. Well, thanks, Samantha. Thanks for having me. Thanks for being
course.
Great collaborators at the NVLD project and supporting the mission of, well, obviously the mission of the NVLD project, and then also the research that we're doing at Columbia to collaborate with you and move the mission forward, right? And as many of you know, our mission is in part to have NVLD, to better understand NVLD and to have a clear, concise, operational definition of NVLD so that you can get a diagnosis, right? And one of the advantages of having a definition will be the diagnosis piece, but then even moving forward, once we can identify clearly people who have NVLD, we can start to work on studies that look at efficacy of treatment. So does treatment work? What kind of treatment works? What kind of people need what kind of treatment? And unfortunately, we don't really have that right now, right? So what we have right now are the tricks of the trade, what I would call sort of anecdotal evidence. So evidence by story from clinician to clinician. I did this and it worked. I tried this and it worked. Or I tried this and it didn't work. And across schools too. So for those of you who are interested, if I don't get to everything today, I'm trying to think where there are other resources. You know, I've done a webinar on Attitude Magazine, which you can see for free, where we talk about, is it NVLD or is it ADHD?
And that's in our video library. So if you want to watch
that,
go
to thenvldproject.org, and you can look at this in the video library, where I outline pretty clearly, I think, a lot of things that teachers and parents can do for kids in the classroom with slides. So there's a PowerPoint presentation, and I show different kinds of things that people can do. So I think one thing to remember is that everyone is different. Everyone has, every person's like a snowflake, right? We're all our own individual cognitive profiles, and so there may be patterns that are similar across groups of people, but everyone has particular strengths and weaknesses. So the first thing you want to do when you're trying to make a treatment plan for someone with NVLD is identify the strengths, identify the areas of weakness, and then think about how really you can remediate or approach or resolve or support each area of weakness. Because we don't have a sort of NVLD in toto remediation program or support program yet. I hope that we will soon, you know, and we're hoping to start working toward that. So I think one thing to think about is getting help for each dimension of the disorder. So for those of you who have a diagnosis, you may have heard, you know, one of the hallmark features of NVLD is to have a deficit in spatial thinking or visual spatial reasoning. And once we see that, then clinicians will look for, well, what other problems is someone having? Are they having problems with math? Are they having problems with social skills? Are they having problems with executive function? Are they having problems with attention? Are they having problems with motor? Are they experiencing anxiety? These are the kinds of things that people with NVLD tend to have, in addition to having this visual spatial difference or just a spatial problem. And so we've been thinking of that as sort of the picture of NVLD. And I think that we're really trying to move toward a model of the spatial deficit being the core deficit, and then people having some functional difficulties. And so your functional difficulty could be different than other people's. So depending on what you or your child's difficulty is, you'll want to go seek different help, right? So there are, for example, kids who are in school who have NVLD, who are having a really hard time with social functioning, need a different kind of support than kids who are, and are doing fine in math, need a different kind of support than kids who are having NVLD in school and having math problems but are fine socially. So what do you do? Which one should we talk about first?
Let's start with the social piece, because I feel like we definitely get a lot more questions about that. So let's start with that, and then we'll hit the math piece.
So I think that, you know, there are different ways to think about this. One is when we say the social piece, are there psychological factors that are affecting your kid, right? So is a child feeling isolated? Is a child feeling separated from their peers? Are they feeling like they don't have social interactions that are satisfying and engaging? And so different things we recommend really for parents is to think across domains or across places where your child spends time. So if they're feeling isolated and lonely at school, talk to their teacher and see if the teacher can help them one other kid that they connect with, and create opportunities for these children to spend time together doing something they both like. And then, of course, all of this will vary depending on how old the person is. So if we're talking about a 7-year-old, or we're talking about a 10-year-old, or about a 15-year-old, it's really different, right? So 15-year-old, teachers can't usually arrange their free time. But 7-year-olds, 10-year-olds, 12-year-olds, teachers really still can get quite involved. Oftentimes, these children feel quite isolated and lonely at lunch, or at recess, or at transition when they're coming into the building, when there's free time that's unstructured and kids are being social. That's when oftentimes these kids feel a little bit at sea. There's no structure, there's no anchor. And if you can give them a job to do, or an adult to connect with who can help them, kids, that can be very reassuring and make them feel better. Another thing to think about, aside from in the school sort of social setting, is to get them some social support at school. So is there a social skills group at school? Is there a social activity that they can join where they'll have built-in friends? Then outside of school, is there something your kid loves to do? Does your child love ceramics and pottery? Can you find a ceramics and pottery studio where they can go for class after school once a week and make friends there? Do they love, you know, I don't know, basketball or golf or anything they love? Then you can try and get gaming. You know, there are places, I don't know, I'm in Brooklyn, and so we have places in Brooklyn now where kids can go to play board games after school, not just video games, but they go to play board games. So there are places in Brooklyn where kids can sign up, they can go after school, they can play Dungeons and Dragons, they can play all these, I can't even think of all the names of the games, but it's quite amazing. They can play chess, they can play these card games, Magic the Gathering. You can play games like that where they're finding other kids who are interested in these same games, and there's some facilitation. So, and it isn't about being invited. It isn't about being included. You get to just go and you find other people who are interested in this also. So it's like having a hobby, and then through that they develop a peer group. And it's structured.
It's a little bit of like a structured social environment outside of school. Because then when they're left to their own to go out and approach people and that kind of thing, it can be a little more difficult, right?
That's too hard, I think. I think really you want an environment where everybody knows that everyone else is coming to do something social. We're all coming here to play this game, and there's an adult who's going to kind of run it, and it doesn't matter if you think I'm cool or you don't think I'm cool. I'm invited to play because I'm here. That's you know, we don't want kids feeling like, oh, I don't know if I was invited. I don't know if they want me. These are, if you can find places like this where everyone's included, that's really terrific.
That's really great.
So that's after school. And then also, of course, you could go to the local resource. If you have these in your community, sometimes speech language pathologists or psychologists run social skills groups, which is a way that children can have more socialization experiences. Then I think it's also important to go back to your school. We do this through my practice often. It's not cheap. but we do this for unfortunately, right? And so it would be nice if families could get this covered by insurance, or families could have access to these services without private pay, where we can read a child's neuropsych report and then do a video conference like this for their school and do education about NVLD, and particularly about this child. So often what we'll do is study the neuropsych report of the child. We don't have to meet the child in person. We talk to the parents. We may meet the kid on Skype. Maybe not, depends on their age. And then we read the neuropsych report, and then we make an in-service for the school where we try to explain to teachers, these are the kinds of difficulties that children with NVLD have. And here's how you can support them. And that's been incredibly successful. Even, and oftentimes what we're doing there is similar to what I'm telling you today, which is, okay, if a child has NVLD and they have attention issues, let's go to the resources, the tools that we know are working for ADHD, and try those. And let's modify them a little bit for the kid with NVLD. So for example, we know that kids with NVLD are going to have trouble, likely, with things that are totally novel. So if you're going to do an ADHD intervention with a sort of token economy where you're rewarding behavior, we have to expect that the first time they try something is going to be a little harder. And that's not true of an ADHD kid. So we're going to need to build that into the reward system. So we talked about social.
So what about if they're struggling with the math piece? I know that's like kind of probably the most academic part of it would be math, I guess.
I think, I think we're not sure about that. I think math is the most popular, is the most written about in terms of academic deficits. But I think that also, I don't know how many of you listening today have had this experience, but many children with NVLD are identified, they don't have trouble to read, but then when they get to 3rd or 4th grade, they're having trouble with reading comprehension. So sometimes that's when we see kids for the first time in our practice, but also with math. And so I think that with any of these academic difficulties, you want to try to find academic support for your child. And that's with any kind of learning problem or attention problem, right? When a child's having a problem in school, go to the school, talk to the teacher, explain to them, my child is trying really hard. He or she feels really badly that they're having this problem, and what do you recommend? And then I think with NVLD in particular, it's really important for teachers to try to understand what's hard for these kids. And we've been working toward, I don't know if it's on the website or not, we've been working toward making a grid sort of when different academic difficulties may be present for a child with NVLD. So for example, fractions. When kids start to learn fractions in math, we know that's a hot button for kids with NVLD. That's going to be really hard because it requires understanding part to whole relationships, and it requires a visual spatial understanding and organization on the written page, right? And so kids with NVLD often have a very hard time with fractions. They have a very hard time reading graphs, have a very hard time learning diagrams for science class, interpreting charts. And if their teachers know that this is hard for them, if the teacher just knows, hey, my kid has a special kind of, this kid in my class has a special kind of learning problem, it's hard for them whenever something is spatial or visual. I need to know that, and I need to give them more verbal cues. I need to talk them through every diagram I put on the board. I need to give them things to say every time I show something visual. That'll help this child.
So I know that we hear a lot from parents about the kids are having trouble in school, and we would love a world where teachers have the time and put the effort into each individual child. But I don't think that necessarily every school is that way, and a lot of teachers are feeling overwhelmed, and they don't have the skills or even the knowledge to work with these students individually. So what would you suggest outside of talking to a teacher about the academic struggles? Like, what would be the next step to help the kids if they're not getting what they need in the actual classroom?
Right. So I will say, I think that I appreciate what you're saying, and all teachers are too busy. We don't pay them enough. They're working too hard, right? They have the hardest job in the world. And I think that if they have this insight that if they could just talk whenever there's a diagram, if they know that, they'll do it, because that's not actually adding too much extra work.
No.
That's one key. And the other key is to tell teachers, my kid needs an example to get started. So these kids go home with math homework and they understood the lesson in class, but they get home for the math homework and they don't have the notes from in class because either they're too young to be taking notes or their handwriting is so poor that they don't take complete notes. And what they need is for number 1 to be completed. So that they can do number 2. They need an example to look at. And their parents need to remind them, here's an example. And if you're the parent and your kid comes home without an example, do the first one for them, with them, sitting next to you, and talk it out loud. Say, oh, here, look, let me show you how to do this first one. The others are like it. Let me see if this reminds you or jogs your memory of what we learned in class today. And do the first fraction problem. And then they'll probably be much better able to do number 2.
Interesting.
And then number 3 and number 4. So I find that sending kids home from tutoring sessions, even if I look at their work and I go, well, they have way more than an hour's worth of work, I'll try to do a few of each kind, so that, and say to them, like, here's a few of how you do this one, here's how you do this one, and then when they get home, they can finish each one because they've got a reminder and a refresher.
Okay.
So as a parent, you can do that. You're not doing their homework for them. It's not cheating. They just, these kids have trouble accessing their memory store for how to do something. It's not that they don't understand it, it's that they don't remember how to do it. And so once you remind them, oftentimes that helps a lot.
Very cool.
But back to your other question, what can you do after you've talked to the teacher? You can try and get a tutor. And if you get a tutor, you want to teach them all those things I just said to you. So you say to the tutor, please can you watch these videos on how to help kids with NVLD? Because they're very unique, right? They tend to have trouble with things that are novel. They tend to have trouble with things that are part whole. They tend to have trouble with things that require estimating time and space. And those are not such obvious things that we do in our life all the time.
Yeah.
It's hard to imagine. Like right now I'm thinking, oh, how long is this interview supposed to be? And I'm thinking about time in a way that people don't generally think about time.
Exactly.
Right? And how many more points do I want to make? So how much time can I spend on each one? And those are the kinds of sort of metacognitive executive functioning processes that may be disrupted in NVLD and that we need to help kids develop. And so having a tutor who can work on the executive function and the particular content area will help a lot. Having the tutor understand what are the executive functions that are generally hard for kids with NVLD is good, but have the tutor read the report. If the tutor doesn't understand the report, ask the psychologist who did the report to explain it to the tutor.
Yeah.
Go back to them.
It's like a team effort.
If you already paid all this money for the report, go back and say, can I pay an extra $100? Can I pay an extra $50 to have the report explained?
Explained. Because it's a team effort. Everyone needs to be talking.
Oh, so that's a very good point. So when we work with a family, we always putting together a team. Right? We have families that we work with around the country, actually around the world, and we're putting together teams. We're saying, who in your community can be, we might be the team leader and get on a phone call every other week or eventually every month or every quarter of the year when the kids are really set and the team is really set up. But the team might have on it like an OT for the motor problems, might have a tutor for the school-related problems, might have someone from the school to help coordinate all these services, might have the treating therapist if the child has anxiety and social problems. So you really need a team, and not everyone on the team has to be an expert in NVLD because that's not going to happen.
Yeah.
Sometimes you just need someone like me to join the team and say, oh, so that problem you just talked about, that's unique to the NVLD, and let's figure out how to work on that. And then they don't need me for another month or two because they know what they're doing.
Yeah.
And we have great tutors, we have great therapists who know how to handle math problems or know how to handle social problems, but they don't necessarily understand it in the context of a spatial deficit that's affecting handling novelty, etc.
Yeah. Cool.
We talk about, I think for the OT piece, you definitely want to try to find, I mean, for the motor piece, you want to try to find OT.
For OT.
For attention problems, of course, you could always think about consulting with a child psychiatrist. We know that there are medications that work very well for helping attention problems, and they may help for a child with NVLD who has attention symptoms that are not rising to the level of ADHD, or for the child who has comorbid, meaning co-occurring ADHD with their NVLD.
Yeah. Okay. So talk a little bit more about the motor skills themselves, because we get questions about that as well. Just, you know, what an OT does, because some of these people may have never talked to an OT before. Some of them really may have just been diagnosed. So kind of explain what an OT would do that can help them with those motor skills that come along with the NVLD diagnosis.
So OTs are occupational therapists, and when they're working with children, their mission, I think, and particularly children with developmental issues who are in school, they can do a variety of things. So OTs traditionally will work on motor skills, but they're not physical therapists, right? So they're helping with developing handwriting skills. They're helping with developing fine motor and gross motor coordination skills, keeping your trunk, being aware of your body in space, coordinating motor skills, coordinating motor acts, I should say. And then also there's a trend now where OTs in the last decade or two are helping with executive functions. They're helping kids with organization, because that is inherently requiring some motor, right?
Yeah.
To organize your things in space, you have to actually physically move them around.
Yeah.
And they're also helping kids with how to track what assignments they have they done their assignments, keeping their notebooks and their backpacks physically organized. So they're helping with this kind of interface between school and the physical world.
Okay, very cool. So we've kind of hit on a lot of different topics today. We've hit our 30 minutes already, believe it or not. almost close to our
not
30.
quite.
So she's talked a lot about a couple different pieces. We already have some questions coming in, so we're actually going to lean in and try to answer some of these. I think it starts here. Can you see it?
Yeah, I also, so can I just respond?
Yeah, whatever, just, and whatever we don't respond to today, you know, if you want to email us, we can definitely try to get to those as well, but we're just going to kind of go through some of these and see what you guys are saying. If you have questions, send them in right now as we're scrolling through so we can answer what we can, so just whatever you want.
So I see one about high-functioning adults who seem, so this, should I just read it out loud?
Yeah,
could you talk about high-functioning adults who come across as fine to other people but are unable to know how to manage, how to respond to situations, and that they tend to need to ask someone how to respond and don't always have that guidance. So this is a very self-aware person asking this question, right? That I think what you're saying is and I think this is quite true, that people with NVLD are exceptionally, oftentimes very, very bright.
Yes.
So, and you do come across as having tremendous skills, and oftentimes that's why they're never picked up when they're little, because the teachers see them as highly verbal, very engaged, really wanting to learn, may not notice the spacey, daydreamy, distracted piece of the attention problems, right? And so they come across as very capable individuals who then are suffering silently inside because they're working so hard and nobody knows. I often will tell parents this analogy of, you know, in your car, I live in New York, so when in the wintertime we park and we parallel park, and then the snow comes, and then the snow plow comes and he plows all the snow against your car. So then you unpark your car, you got to get your car over this huge hump of snow. And what happens is you're pressing the pedal, you're putting gas into the tank, and the wheels are spinning and spinning, and the car's going nowhere.
Interesting. Right?
So that's what's happening to these kids. They're putting all the gas from the tank into the engine. They're flooding the engine. They're pressing the pedal. They're trying so hard. And all it looks like to the outside world is that they're not doing anything. Yeah. They're not moving. And that's really, really frustrating, especially when you're bright and self-aware and you know that you're trying really hard and it's not working. And I think that's that's like a sidestep from your question. Is really like, what can you do to get some feedback about a social interaction when you didn't know what to do, and in retrospect you want to know, is what I did appropriate, or was there a different way to handle this? And I think that probably a good way to get some help with that would be to seek out someone who is an expert in social anxiety.
Okay.
Because when people have social anxiety, there are particular techniques and tools that therapists use to help patients and individuals, clients, work on these skills. So there are certain things that we can do with people to help them gather information. We call it like gathering information, and some homework assignments where they collect the data and come back to session and talk about it, and we try to problem solve and work it that way. And so there really are very specific therapeutic techniques for trying to work on these kind of problems. And I'm not saying that the person who's asking this question has social anxiety. I'm just saying we need to borrow from the social anxiety tools to help the person with NVLD.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I think that's the game with all NVLD, is borrow what you can. So really try to hone in on what is this child or individual high-functioning adult's problem, and borrow from what's known. So if you can really, instead of saying, oh, it's all NVLD, by listening to your question, I think what you're getting at is some concerns and anxieties about a social interaction. Then we can go to the social anxiety literature and see what's there and what we can use.
Interesting. Okay, very cool. So we're going to scroll down just a little bit and see what other questions we've got.
Let's keep reading. Here's one. When do you project that NVLD will be included in the DSM? Where are you in the process? I mean, that's very impossible to predict, to know. But we are where we are in the process. I can tell you is that we've had, with the support of the NVLD project, 2 consensus conferences at Columbia University where we've invited experts from around the world. We've developed what we think is a pretty good working draft of a definition of the disorder. And we have outlined, with the help of our Scientific Advisory Council the studies that we need to do to complete our application to the DSM. So there are certain scientific requirements for DSM, like you have to demonstrate that a disorder is a discrete clinical entity. You have to demonstrate that it has longitudinal stability, meaning over time. Someone who's diagnosed in 2010 will continue to show the disorder in 2015 or something like that. So we're working on those studies now. We also need to show reliability of our diagnosis, which means that if the same patient was seen by 3 different psychiatrists or psychologists or social workers, they'd all get the same diagnosis. So those are the kinds of studies we're working on now. If you look at the NVLDproject.org website, you'll see the studies I have already conducted. The first thing we decided we needed to do was show that the brain basis of this disorder is different from that of autism, which we have a paper that was published last year in Neuropsychology, the journal, showing that the social difficulties that people with NVLD and autism spectrum disorder have are similar in terms of parent ratings. I'm not saying they're similar in terms of the quality of the social problems, but overall, when we give parents rating scales, your kids have social difficulties. Both groups of parents say, yes, my kid has social difficulties, but what we showed was that the brain basis of those social difficulties was different. Okay. And that we did that for our DSM application to show to the DSM that NVLD is not autism spectrum disorder. We're also working on another paper to look at the brain basis of the spatial problems in NVLD, and that paper is under review right now. So those pieces of evidence are very important for our application to the DSM. The other thing that's very important for application to the DSM is how common is this thing, right? It's called prevalence. And so I have been working very carefully and hard for the last year with several collaborators, Mike Milham from Child Mind Institute, Carrie Keyes from Columbia University, Jessica Breitman and Jack Davis from California, who are in private practice, write books and do testing and treatment for children with NVLD. I'm forgetting anyone on this list. Thomas Paus from Canada, who is working with us, giving us another data set. So what we have been doing is estimating the frequency of NVLD in 3 different data sets. And then we will be preparing a manuscript for publication very soon. I'm pretty sure somewhere on the web there are talks that I've done where I'm showing these slides. We showed them at the American Academy of Child and Adolescent Psychiatry this year. Yeah. We think that the prevalence we're estimating at about the frequency. I'm going to call it frequency, not prevalence, because it's a technical term. So if something is prevalence, it means we designed a study to measure its frequency in this population cohort. We haven't done that. We're using already available data to estimate. So because of that, we're calling it frequency. Okay. And it's coming out around 3%. Interesting. Right, and prevalence of autism is 1.8%. Okay. So we're putting this at about a 3% disorder right now, and we're preparing that manuscript for publication, hopefully to submit in the next couple months. Okay, cool. So if you want to, for your question, I didn't answer your actual question, right? So those are all the things we're doing to work toward applying to DSM. So our goal right now, our working goal is to have an application into DSM by 2021. Because we got to finish these other 2 studies on stability and reliability, and then submit the whole package. So it's a lot of work. And then, then there's the review process. Yeah.
And if you want to learn more about the consensus meetings or the research papers that have already been done and published, they're all on the website. We sent an email out back, I think, in November about the consensus meeting. So if you didn't get that, then just let us know, and I can, if you email us at info@nvld.org, I can send you that email again. We're going to keep going through some of these questions. We may not get to all of them, but we will try to answer what we can.
I'm saying maybe in the States it's quicker than here. It's not even recognized in Belgium. I mean, we do need to do some international work, right? I know in Spain there's a group. I know in Italy there's a group.
I think Turkey.
Yeah,
I don't know if it's a group, but they do a lot of education in Turkey as well.
So someone is asking, can we discuss social skills in NVLD? We did.
Yeah, the video will be available later, so if you want to go back and watch that later, we talked about the social skills earlier. Kelly, you're asking about books for NVLD for teens. There's really not a lot out there like geared towards teens necessarily, but depending on what your teen would be interested in reading, we do have a book list on the website for parents and adults and teachers. So if you wanted to kind of check those out and see if anything would work I don't know if you know of anything else for teens. We've got some out there. There's not a lot right now. Eventually.
I would say, again, the most important thing is to figure out what is the problem this teen is having.
Exactly.
And find a book about that rather than a book about NVLD. And of course, Brightman and Davis, all their books about NVLD are fantastic. Someone's asking, thank you for doing these. I would love your guidance on best environment for an NLD high schooler. Better to be in a school for kids with learning differences and is very understanding, but perhaps not as academically challenging, versus a mainstream school with small class size. So I'll say this. First of all, an NLD, a school for kids with learning differences better have small class sizes.
Yeah.
So hopefully that's not the difference between these two settings. Probably, I think what you're getting at is, do you sacrifice the academic rigor for the learning disability differences? And I think it's going to really depend on what kind of difficulties a kid is having. And so there are people with NVLD who have trouble much more socially and academically are fine.
Okay.
Right? So they are going to be better able to handle the academic challenges of a mainstream school, but have the social difficulties. So if that's the case, which it sounds like for this kid, because it sounds like your concern is that the learning differences school is going to be not challenging enough, then it suggests this kid isn't having so much academic difficulty, but more social. I would say you could try the mainstream school, and if it's not working, go to the LD school. Yeah. And if you're going to try the mainstream school, you need a good team. You need to put together a team. You need, and you need to get someone who's an expert in NVLD to meet with the person who's providing direct support to the child at school and hopefully outside of school, and to get those three people, your team leader from wherever they are around the world or the country, Skyping in to talk to the therapist and the guidance counselor or school psychologist at the school, trying to create a synergy and support the child in all of these different areas. I think we have, so we're a little bit over time, but
yeah, we're a little bit over.
We'll take one more question.
Well, we'll find one more question. Oh, I don't think we have any more. Oh, Paula, congrats. Oh, I think we talked to you last time, Paula. Your son is driving his own car now, and he's an honor student, and we think that's just really great to hear. We love the success stories. Oh, that's cool. So you met with the school and got some study books, and they were able to help you. That's really great when you can find a school that's going to help you with that.
Right?
Yeah.
And also what you're saying here is you have a set of books for school and home, so that eliminates the problem of forgetting things.
Yeah. Yeah.
So again,
have a book.
So here's an example. That's an ADHD technique, right? We know that kids with inattentive type ADHD forget things all the time.
Yeah.
So sometimes when they have a dual household, so the parents are divorced, they'll have one set of books at each home, or they'll have a set of books at home and a set of books at school. So what you've done is, I don't know if you knew you were doing it, but what we've done essentially there is take something that's tried and true for the ADHD world that has a similar symptom to the NVLD piece, borrowed it.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, so I think that we've hit our time for today. We very much appreciate speaking with Amy today, and I hope you guys have learned something new and are enjoying these Facebook Live sessions.
It was great. I'm happy to come back.
I think that it's really good. You guys are able to interact with us in real time, and we can answer some of your questions. If we didn't get to a question in the comments today, we'll try to get online in the next week or so and answer some of those to the best of our ability for what we can. And yeah, I think that's it. So we'll be back next month with another expert speaking about something different. But in the meantime, send us your emails and your messages if you have something specific that you want to hear about, and we will try really hard to find someone that can answer those questions and talk about what you're wanting to hear about. So
I'm happy to come back.
I really appreciate it. It was great.
Thanks for having me.
And we will see you guys next time. Bye, everyone. Thank you.